All right, so usually the sessions are recorded so that you can go back and watch. I am not sure how you get the recordings. That part I don't know.
I think they will save the links, I think, in the calendar later. On the April session, I think I'll be traveling exactly on the 14th. But if we're going to have the lesson, I mean, if we cannot move the lesson, then I'll just watch the recording. It's fine.
Yeah, just watch the recording. Let me see. If there's more of you missing the session, then yeah, it'll have to be moved. But if it's just one person,
not problem. I'll just watch it.
Yeah, just watch it. That'll be it, really. Hello, Sophie. Okay. Okay. I'll just wait. So I guess in order, for the sake of time, we can start by introducing ourselves gradually, and hopefully as we're doing that, one or two more people will join, and then we don't have to do that like 10 minutes into the session, right? It's the first session, is very useful for us to sort of get to know each other. I'll introduce myself lastly, just in case your colleagues come later, and then I don't want them to have missed that bit. Also, it's something within the slides anyways, which those of you who've logged on, you've probably already read the information about me anyways, but nonetheless, I will do that. So who wants to go first? It'll be useful to just tell us your name, your full name, but also how you would like to be addressed in class. So it could be a short form of your name or just the first name. Just tell us exactly how you want us to address you in class. Some of the sessions, especially the live sessions, are built to be interactive. So I get to split you into groups. So that name will therefore be useful for whoever is in your group, so they can refer to you in the name that you prefer. Does that make sense? So tell us where you are as well and why you signed up for this particular course, right? So I'll repeat the questions again. Your full name, but also your preferred name. If you actually want a nickname, that's fine too. Your preferred name, where exactly you are, and why you signed up for this module. You could also add what you're hoping to learn as well. Okay. Feel free to unmute. I believe
Okay, my name is Emilia Sava. You can call me Emilia or Emily, I don't mind. I'm based in Nicosia. I work in a company. We have funds under management, and as well as a fund manager company regulated by SISEC. So I am involved in compliance and as well as in risk management. At the moment, I'm a deputy risk manager, and after passing also the SISEC exams last year, I decided to take some more courses related to risk management. That will help me with the function that I want to develop in. And that's it.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Emily, right? Emily, did I get that right? Good.
Emily, yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Who wants to go next?
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Konstantinos. I'm in London, and I work in a compliance consulting company. And I'm taking this course as a module in the graduate training program that I'm in, and yeah, hoping to learn a lot about financial risk management.
Good. Thank you very much. You didn't tell us your preferred name. Can we just call you Konstantinos? Or...
Yeah, Konstantinos is my preferred name.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sophie Rintmore, but you can call me Sophie. Like Konstantinos, I'm working for a consultancy company in London, and we have to do this part of our graduate training program. This is one of the modules. I don't have any experience in risk, so yeah, should be quite good.
All right, thank you all. That's really good. I was hoping by now, hopefully we get one or two more coming along. There's 6 students, so I just only have 50% of the class. Not sure how we do that. So hopefully our colleagues will join. The session is being recorded, so at the very least they can watch this bit. So I will introduce myself. I am Angela Isa. I work for the University of Leicester, so I'm currently in Leicester, in England. I teach at the University of Leicester as a lecturer. I teach banking, finance, and also financial risk management to master's students as well. My preferred name is Angela, so please just call me Angela, that's fine, as well. And I'm hoping that we'll enjoy this time together. So I'll just quickly talk about what we'll do for the next 1 hour, 55 minutes, essentially what we'll do. So I'll start by really introducing you to the module. So it will be a bit repetitive for those of you who've already looked through. I don't want to assume that everyone has. So I'll really imagine that you never saw anything and just start taking you through everything as though you have no clue, all right? So just to make sure that you know exactly where to find what and why. So I'll do that, and then I'll talk you through how the module will run, the timing, the assessment, as much detail as possible. We'll go into that. And then at some point, I'll stop so you can ask questions, get further clarification. So that's the first half of the session. I'm hoping we spend no more than 30, 40 minutes in that session, and then I can hopefully give you a 10-minute break. Then in the second half, when you come back, I will then try to go over the first week's slides with you. But the way I try to do things is to get students to do more and me do less. And this is where I was hoping to put you in groups, because I thought there was 6 of you, and I was hoping to put you in groups of 3. So now that's going to be a bit difficult because there's exactly 3 of you and I can't let one person work alone. So I might just let you all into a group by yourselves and work through. So there's at the bottom of the slides, there is an activity, but the activity requires you to have read the slides and apply that knowledge. And so essentially for 30 minutes together, because there's 3 of you, the whole idea is you try and do the activity looking through the slides. Does that make sense? That's the second half. And then we come back and we have some sort of feedback, and then you can question me about the slides, things that were not clear, things you want further clarification on. And pretty much that's how live sessions will run. It will always be some sort of activity that you get to do, and I get to also talk about the slides. So without further ado, let me try and share my screen. Please let me know if you can see my screen or not. Please unmute and just tell me, or
Yes.
give me a thumbs up. Yeah, good. Great. Thank you for that. So I already introduced myself. Just one key thing I'll point out. I don't have an email for EIMF. Just contact me through my Leicester email. That's my preferred method as well. Also, because I am still working for the University of Leicester, I am more likely to be checking this email than I am to check any other email, which is also why they didn't create one for me, okay? So please just send an email to, it's ai171@leicester.ac.uk. I think, I don't always know if this always works, but sometimes you can just do le.ac.uk and I still get the same email if you don't want to type the whole of the Leicester thing. Okay, so I've already talked about myself, so let's skip that bit. And again, I repeated the email just so you know. We'll talk through how many sessions we have very soon, but you might have questions. You might, it's always good to send me an email, but maybe I've explained it via email and you think, well, could we just have a 10-minute chat? Could we just talk this through for 10, 15 minutes, if that's okay? I'm happy to do that. So long as I'm free, I'm not having to teach. I'm happy to just chat with you for 10 minutes. The problem with that is I use Teams that's provided by my own university. I think from my little knowledge of technology that you don't necessarily need to have downloaded Teams. You can always use the browser one. So if you want to, open a free Teams account, that'll be easy for me because we already use Teams. Alternatively, though, I also have Zoom. I have a personal Zoom account, and I'm happy to also send you a Zoom link so we can chat. So Team or Zoom, works for me. If within your company you already have access to Teams, that's great. It makes life easy for us. We can quickly set up a Teams meeting and just have a quick chat. Last year I found that worked more for some students. They literally just email, Angela, can we have a chat? Can we just have a 20-minute, a 10-minute? And then I discover what the issue is at the meeting. So based on your requests, that's fine. It can be just you. It can be you and another student for whatever reason. That's also fine with me. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the main way of communicating. So now I'm going to leave this and come on to EIMF, where I'm assuming you already know how to log in. So that bit I'm not going to talk about. I assume you already have some sort of account with them. They've given you that particular address, you've created your password, and you actually can access this particular module. Now, the way it will work will be every week there will be section 1, week 1, section 2, week 2, section 3, week 3. It will carry on like that onto week 14. However, not all sessions are live sessions. Okay, so some sessions we're not meeting, and you find out very soon that we'll be meeting only 6 times. Don't worry, I'll repeat it as many times just so you don't forget. We're going to meet a total of 6 times, including this. Now, of course, upon request, we can include an extra session, but again, that will be trying to find out when everybody's available, how to work around that as well. So I'm quite flexible. As you can already see, I don't know if this is quite clear, but I would advise that if you can access this, you can do so on your computer now. So that's easier rather than you trying to squint to see what's on my screen. It could make life a lot easier for you, because I can't also find how to zoom in a little bit. There should be ways to do that. Okay, I hope that's working fine. Okay. So typically, I'll give you a brief introduction to this particular week. It's just really trying to introduce you to what's risk, mostly what's risk classifications, sources of risk, drivers of risk within an organization. So very basic, very basic week 1, as you would expect, right? You don't expect something complex in the very first day. So no, I ease you into it gradually, and we take it up a notch as we go along, okay? And so what you find here is the slides I'm going to be using in this session. They're all in the live session. But what I'm going to ask you to do in the second half, you find that here, because there I'm trying to get you to sort of look through the slides for the week while I'm here trying to do the activity and get feedback. That's good, because then I can focus in other live sessions on other pieces of work. The other very key thing about this is the only class where we actually focus on 1 week. So enjoy it. Future classes, unfortunately, will be focusing on 3-4 weeks content. Therefore, how is this going to work, right? It means every week you will be expected on your own to have done the reading of the slides, follow the instructions on the slides, do whatever activity is added or included. You might not get it right. You could get some wrong. Write down your questions. I would prefer to receive your questions via email. It allows me to sort of put everything together to understand what's not clear. And then I can plan the sessions, the live sessions better to incorporate that. Because again, it's 2 hours. And even if we decide to focus on 3 weeks and 2 hours, we can't go through all of the slides, all right? It's just never going to happen. So we would have to prioritize. And I can only do that if you do your bit, all right? So you've got to help me to help you here. You've got to read the slides. I understand that we're all busy, so I try not to give too much, okay? I think. But if it's too much, let me know, I'll reduce the task. But I try to understand that you're working, probably taking the evening to come to the session. You know, we all have our lives and all of that. So I get it. But if you don't engage with it, then I can't exactly go through the entire 3 weeks of slides. That's impossible. I would then just use my own knowledge to prioritize what I think is most important to go over. And that might not be what you want. Does that make sense? So please, you have a responsibility to go over the slides, write your questions and send them over to me. I am begging you, okay? I am begging you, please do it. It makes life easy for all of us. Okay, so this is the only session, that's why I can give 30 minutes to that. The slides are not too many. And as a point of duty, I will try as well to make sure the slides are not many. So in this case, it's 20 slides. So 30 minutes, 20 slides, not too much. Obviously, the first slide is an introduction. The second slide is an outline. So essentially, we're talking 17 slides of content here that you're trying to consume. I think because I zoomed, it's going to be difficult to actually take you through the slides. But when you go on there, you see it's not too much detail on a page, right? So you can consume this information 40, 30 minutes. And there's 3 of you if someone is much faster. But of course, some of these slides, like this one that has a diagram, you might want my opinion on, well, is this diagram quite clear? Why should I care about this diagram a little bit more? So I'm assuming that you might have questions on the diagram, for example. I'm assuming that weeks that involve calculations, you might want me to sort of work it out. These are the kind of things that if you don't tell me what to do, that's where I would usually try to focus. Okay, calculations, diagrams, where it might not be very clear or straightforward if you're just reading it on your own. Okay, so that's it about the way the lecture slides will be presented. Now I will try to keep consistent, but there will be weeks where there will be 30-something slides, but I'll try my best to keep it at 20 to 30-something, no more, okay? As much as I can, just to give you the most important thing. Now, here's the bit that most students don't like and typically never do. I am not assuming you're like those students. At this point, you might also have a question for me. So we have a place called resources, and I have put some material, everything that I could find as free. The only material that is not here is the material, especially that will be relating to all of this, that I need to confirm that it's okay for me to share it here, all right? So these are free PDF copies of books. Now, you will never read the entire book. I tell you that firsthand now, okay? That's never going to happen. However, in some weeks, I will refer you to the chapters that I've used or derived some of these issues from. Now, does that mean that I derived it from the entire chapter? No. It's sections of the chapter that I could have actually used, okay? Like I said, once I confirm the other material, I could provide that as well. And again, that has chapters. And again, you'll be getting references to the chapters. So what will happen is at the end of slides, you will get reference to which of these books, right, was used in creating that slide. But mind you, like I said, you might end up with a list of 4 or 5. Doesn't mean that you have to read all 5 chapters. It just means that you need to use the slides as a guide to tell you what you want to further read in the textbook. Does that make sense? I'll repeat that again. I could potentially, and I say potentially because some of these books will repeat the same topic. For example, when we start going into the different risk is covered in at least 3 of these books, including the textbook that I've not yet added, the material I'm yet to add, that will also cover it. So essentially, I'll give you a list of 4, but the information is in 1 or 2 chapters in this list of 4, and it's only sections within that chapter, which means you have to sort of filter through all of that information to say, okay, which section should I read? And so again, the slides serve as a guide, all right? And the slides have like the most important information that needs to be there, but then to read further, you will need to go into the textbook. Does that make sense? Now, why is this necessary? It will be necessary when we start talking about your assessment. You will find that the slides really point you to particular things, for example, measures or management approaches, but it will not go into detail about those approaches. It will highlight key things about the approaches, but not go into depth. Does that make sense? In one or two of our live sessions, I will take you through some of the methods, especially the ones that I think are really complicated, okay? But you might find some that are so easy, and the book just really outlines it quite clearly. And there is where you need to do your research, because the final one of the assessments for this module requires you to write a risk report, all right, a financial risk report, so to speak. And that's where you would have to sort of look at the different measures in order to express whether or not a company has operational risk, marketing risk, market risk, I should say, interest rate risk. Do you see what I mean? There are different measures, so many that unfortunately we can't cover everything, especially if I'm trying to only give you 20 to 30 slides. That's not ever going to happen, right? So I'll only be able to highlight some of these things, and starting from easiest to complex, and then you have to go read a bit more. Any questions at this point? No? Okay, good. And so you can find that in a place called resources, all right? That's where all the books are. Good. Now let's just go through the guide, which is probably the most important thing for the most of you, because it has most of the information that you need. Obviously, I would expect you to, after this session, spend time this week whenever you can on the guide. But I'll point you to some key areas you want to go back and look at. So obviously you can look at those later on, but here, these are the time. There's 6 sessions that we are going to meet, but more importantly, your deadlines, all right? So please, manually type it into your calendar if you have to, so that you don't forget that we have sessions. Let me know if there's a clash. If there's so many of you who's going to missing a session, then there's no point running the session. We'll probably have to then reschedule if it's possible, yeah? But if it's just one of you, then we'll carry on as planned, okay? So again, I need you to communicate about these sessions as to whether or not you can make it. The deadlines are already fixed. I hope you're happy with them. So you've already seen the assessment, which means you're free to start thinking about the assessment. And we'll talk about that in a moment or two. But yeah, this is one key area you want to go back and look into. This is another area most students are concerned about, because of the weighting. One of the assessments carries 40%, the coursework, and the final exam carries 60%. So I would basically take 40% of your score plus 60% of your final exam score, and that would give a number, okay? And that number would determine whether you pass the course or not. So please spend some time understanding that, all right? And understanding what you need as a score in order to pass this module. Then this is another area you want to spend a little bit of time, because, so one key thing I'll say, L is live sessions. So we're having our first session now, live. And also I put in green what we will be focusing on, or what I've planned to focus on in that session. So observe. So our next live session, we're going to have to cover 1, 2, 3. Now in my head, I've just said it is impossible to cover all 3. Let's just focus mainly on 1, 2. That's what I've planned to do. But if you have questions on introduction to financial products, of course, we could cover that as well. But this is where, again, you're required to do the work of covering content here and asking those questions in this session. Does that make sense? Here, I repeat, same again, market risk, interest rate risk, credit risk. And what do we do? Well, we try and review one of the key things I'll be doing in this session, which students find a bit difficult, is value at risk and CAPM. And we'll probably take 1 or 2 examples of the measures. So I'll really be focusing on the measures in live sessions, because they can be a bit complex, talking about how you calculate them. So that's really, for me, the focus of live sessions will be a bit more calculation, how to do oriented, yeah? Where I probably show you what to do and then ask you to try to do it yourself. Does that make sense? That is really how I've designed this session as well. But anything you also have as a question, please feel free to ask. Again, similar pattern here. I've taken the calculation one here, and a bit of case study perhaps, to also prepare you for the final exam. So you get a sense of what kind of questions could come up in the final exam, yeah? And then here, I tend to just give what I call assessment support. So in other words, I'm hoping that by this time you've all written your first, second drafts of your work, and you're happy to sort of start asking very specific questions on how to improve your work, yeah? And then we can talk about that before you then submit. Does that make sense? I give you a bit of help there before you submit. And then again, in the revision session, we would then focus on like preparing for exam. What I do sometimes is I give a mock that mimics the structure and the format, and sometimes, but not always, the topics that will be covered in the exam. Okay, and I put you in a bit of an exam condition to do it and give feedback on basically how you've answered those questions and how you should have answered those questions to prepare you for the main exam. So I try my best to give as much support as I can, so that you don't feel like I just threw you into the deep as well. Again, this is something you spend time on your own, a bit more detail, week by week, what to expect and what's been covered. And again, where there's live sessions, I point it out that they are live sessions, okay? So I'll come back into the room and see if you have any questions, and I'll take your questions before I carry on with the slides. So any questions?
No.
No.
So far, no. Later when you start, when you start with the material.
Okay. All right. Typically I get questions after I talk about assessment, but all right, fair enough. Let's carry on then. Let's go back to the slides bit. So I think I explained this, I think. So some of the books, this is supposed to be the key book, but like I said again, these topics replicate across all the other books, so you will get a list of books as well. So I put a brief list of the main ones. I also tend to add YouTube videos, and some weeks I give you maybe 10 questions to try. The 10 questions could come from all the topics that's been covered so far. So it's multiple choice, don't worry. Okay, I know you're busy people, but it's just for you to practice to see if you're really getting some stuff, if you missed out on something, and then you can go back and clarify that, okay, that issue. So you'll be automated to tell you the answer and tell you where to go back to read more. So it's just knowledge based. It doesn't count towards your final assessment, but it's just a way to get you thinking. I think I've already covered this. Again, this is something you read in the guide, but I'm happy to go over it. You can glance and you can see most of it's about risk. Where's the source of risk? What is financial risk management? And again, the different risks, there are various measures. And then financial statements, because again, sources of risk do come from there. Some of these are reflected in financial statements as well. And of course, it's not enough to know the risk and how you measure them. It's enough we need to know how to manage a risk. And of course, we talk about a risk report, which is the one of the assessments. And again, this is replicated from the slides. And I think I've talked about this, but I'll just point you to this here. I think I've talked about these too, so let's just talk about this. Yes, I could use newspaper articles, especially when we start dealing with case studies. I might ask you to read that, and then when we come to class, we discuss it. But it may be on just one, maybe 2 occasions, okay? Everything you typically need will be on the EIMF classes 365. So every material will be there. I will upload on a weekly basis. Now, if you find that you want week 1, say you want week 2 and 3 now, because it just allows you to be faster that way, let me know, okay? The problem with that is for some students, it's overwhelming. They've already planned their lives around studying weekly content. And so what I might need to do, if you're the type that you actually just want to consume as much as possible when you have time in your diary, then I could email it to you so that I don't put other students under pressure so that students don't think suddenly, do I have to do multiple weeks? No, it's a week by week consumption in chunks. And I don't want to put anyone under any form of pressure that, oh, suddenly I need to finish this so I can look at that. The temptation is quite strong, especially if it's there, right? It's less when you can't see it. You're not tempted by it. So if you want it, say you're working on your piece, you just really want to know, okay, Angela, can I just know what market risk is? Just send me that, please. Then I'm happy to send you the slide for market risk, credit risk, operational risk. This tends to happen, students tend to ask for it because then it allows them to start visualizing their final assessments and what measures they might want to use in time. So I understand that, but I won't put it on the platform, okay? You just have to email me and I'll send you a copy, please. This is the rationale, okay? So that's mainly, I think I've talked about that. And then the assessments, I already expressed this, but let's just reiterate. The exam, the final exam. Now, this is something we can discuss, especially you're all in different organizations and in different locations. Your exam needs to be supervised. And if that's going to be a problem, then there is two options. I can either create a sort of open book timed exam, or I could request all of you to join me online at a fixed time, and then you get to do the exam online. That's how I did it with last year's students, because they were in different locations as well, in different parts of the country as well. So we all had to agree a time, and everyone was online, and I could watch you and supervise you virtually, if that makes sense. So sometimes we find that works best for everyone. Sometimes we find that it's not best, but closer to the time, as you get a bit more clarification, you think, Angela, this might be difficult to find someone in my office to supervise me on my exam, then we might need to look at alternatives, because there's, some of you are in different organizations. It might be difficult to ensure everyone gets supervised unless we all meet online. So a little bit about the coursework. We'll go into the assessment brief in a moment, and we'll repeat it as required as we go along, especially as you spend time on it. 3,000 words. Who thinks that's overwhelming? Trust me, as you start going through it, you start saying, can I go over? Angela, please. Can I go? And I'm like, no, we can't. Sorry. That's part of the assessment. All right. So it looks like a lot. Trust me, very quickly it becomes too little. And that's part of the assessment, where you have to force yourself to sort of think about what's the most important thing I have to say. What's the best way to design this report? Okay. I know it will be challenging, but look on the bright side. You get to choose the company. All right. I don't choose it for you. You choose it yourself. So, you give yourself the task. That's how I see it, right? But one thing to bear in mind, which is why I've put up the samples, is that there are different measures. Now, there are different measures, but most of these measures require access to annual reports. So whilst you're picking a company, you want to make sure you have access to their reports. If you don't pick it. All right, because I can't give you access to it either, okay? If it was at the University of Leicester, that's a different case, because we subscribe to multiple databases, and I could start referring you to which database you might be able to get data from, but that's not the case here. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is you need to get data yourself. A lot of these measures are ratio oriented. In other words, they require you using some things in the balance sheet and the income statement and calculating ratios, all right? Or putting ratios together. Some are a bit more complex than that. They actually require share price information. And that's really difficult to do, okay? Or to get access to, unless, of course, because last year I did have someone who used a company from Russia, and he could get access to the data, and I said, that's fine. So again, make sure you can get access to the data before you choose the company. The only databases that are free that I can recommend is Yahoo Finance and Google Finance. which for Google Finance is a bit complicated how you can download that data. Yahoo Finance might not also have the company you're looking at, plus the data is not 100% reliable in some respect. But for the purpose of using and understanding the concept, it is fine. I'm not actually asking you to send this to an actual company. You're doing it for knowledge-based purposes, right? And the skills that you get from it, nothing more. So at this stage, again, any questions? No questions.
I wanted to clarify, when you said the annual reports, you mean the accounts, right? The financial statements of the company.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so just to reiterate, to summarize, materials will be uploaded for each lecture, so weekly lectures. Recommended textbooks are usually at the end of those lecture slides to tell you which chapter, but like I said, it's sections of it. It's not like the whole chapter, so I'm not asking you to read 5 chapters on risk, for example. You would have to use the slides as a guide to show you where to focus on, okay? I'm trying to make sure you don't buy any books. That's why I've tried to give you PDF copies where possible, yeah? But yeah, if you feel like you need to buy your own copy, hey, go ahead, all right? Because I guess when you leave the module, you might not get access to it anyways, all right? And then based on your self-study, right? Help me to help you. That's our model. Help me to help you. Based on your questions, that will guide our live sessions on what needs to be reviewed. Okay? Yeah? Yes. Kinda, maybe, good. All right. I am glad that that was clear. So now it's question time, basically. So I'm right on time. I think I actually even finished a bit earlier than I planned to. But is there anything you need me to repeat?
Is the exam multiple choice?
Okay, so no, last year was not multiple choice. It was, I think, 4 or 5 questions, essay-based questions. This year, however, it is very likely to change because of the 2 things I said. One, you're in different companies, you need to be supervised. I don't know how you get supervised. That is problematic. I would have been happy to do it multiple choice because it's easy as well to supervise you for that. But again, I get different issues as to technology, blah, 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 blah. So what we did last year is I put everybody online. It was essay-based. All they had to do was take screenshots of it. Or some students said, I'd rather write on Word document. That's fine. So long as I can see you and I can see that you're not using resources that you shouldn't be using because it should be a closed book exam, that was fine, okay? So it's either I'm designing a closed book exam or I'm designing an open book exam. Again, your cohort, because you're in different places, it might be that I have to do an open book and then just give you a time when you have to submit in 2 hours. That might be the most feasible thing. I don't know. So I cannot tell you exactly how the exam will go for now. As we go along and supervision becomes a problem, then open book might be the best way. Okay, maybe. Let's fingers crossed. We'll see. Any other questions? No. Okay. I think, let me just see. I might want to share one last thing before I let you all go. Let's go back to, let's see. I will go back to, let's go back here. So just to reiterate what's on here, you've got the slides for today, which you're going to use in a moment after the break. Everything I've just said is here, all right? So if you forgot anything, please, it's there. Go back, download it, have a look, that's fine. The course guide is here. I showed you a glimpse of it before. And then what we have here is a sample, all right? So we've got 2 samples actually. This assessment 1 is a sample. It was done last year by a student just like you. So it'll be useful for you to have a look. Barclays Bank was what this particular individual used. So you can, spend some time looking at it. You can already see some reoccurring themes, right? Connected obviously to the content that we looked at. So it's useful for you to have a look. You're pretty much doing exactly the same. My only rule is that you cannot work on the same company that the samples are on. All right, that's the only rule. So Barclays is one example. The other example is AstraZeneca. So again, no one can work on AstraZeneca, no one can work on Barclays, because you have the samples to sort of guide you on what you may need to do. I've put this because one of them used a lot of technical calculations, one didn't use a lot of technical calculations, so that you don't feel panicked that, oh, I didn't do far, am I going to fail? No, okay, that's not the basis. I mean, it's good to know as many technical stuff as possible, but what I'm aiming to teach here is purpose. Which measures, why? Which measures did you choose? Why? Can you justify it? And on that basis, can you interpret? Can you infer? This is what I'm assessing you on. There's so many measures out there, trust me. And your ability to choose which one and understand the limitations of it is really important. Does that make sense? It will, if it doesn't make sense now, it will make sense over time. All right, so your task of the week, pretty much, this week, next week, the next 3 weeks, you would really want to spend some time looking at the samples, but looking at it with the assessment. So first assessment due on the 8th, that is what you want to go read. All right, so I recommend you start by reading this, right? Reiterate again, submission is via email, okay? So there isn't a portal to submit. There is a deadline though, okay? 3 p.m. on the day, okay? 3 p.m. UK time on the day, depending on where you are.
8th of June. When is the first assignment? Sorry.
So the first assignment, I'll correct that actually, should be June 2022, because we are in 2022. It is Wednesday. Let me just check my calendar to be sure that typo is only based on the year. Let's see, June. Yes, the 8th of June is a Wednesday in 2022. Apologies for the 21 there. And yeah, so please, I would expect questions from you in the next live session on whether or not you want further clarification on this, what you want me to, do you want me to spend time on this first before we go ahead? But obviously you need to read it first, okay? So read it, highlight it, put your questions down, and then ask. Even if you want clarification on how the marking guide works, but read it first, okay? Does that make sense? Please read it first and then ask your questions. So learning activities for the next 3 weeks. Get familiar with the assessment, please. Very familiar. Get familiar with the samples. Get familiar with the course guide. So there is a lot here you're going to have to somehow create your diary to accommodate some of this, or adjust your diary, I should say, to accommodate consuming these very important information. Okay? Yeah? All right, good. So today, the only thing I need to focus on is this guy, Introduction to Risk. But that's after we come back for the break. So any questions before I send you away?
No.
No? All right. So let's grab a 50-minute break. Enjoy it for today, because you won't get it for the next few sessions. This is the only day you get this sort of long break. So let's enjoy this 15-minute break that we would never get again, I promise you, on any other live sessions. So I'm being as generous as I can upfront before I steal it away. And you pay the price for enjoying 15 minutes later, okay? So enjoy 15 minutes, grab a cup of coffee if you need to, a cup of tea, water, take a pee if you need to, and be back. Oh, actually, let's give you 17. So we'll be back on the hour, okay? Okay, so sorry, but apparently Zoom only does breakout room for fixed for fixed times, and it sets it automatically, and then it's going to close every time. So I'm going to have to do it again and put you back in. But in the meantime, how much progress did you make? Have you finished reading at least?
Yeah, all of us read it, and we chose a company in Cyprus that is service provider. They provide legal services, financial services, accounting. They have investment in UK.
Okay,
And Konstantinos decided a risk he's going to start with.
I see. All right, so I'll open the room again and allow you continue, but it's fixed, so it will bring you out again, and we can just use that as progress checks before I send you back in. All right. Okay, so so it's automatically 15 minutes every time. Okay. Okay, welcome back again. Like I said, it only does it for 15 minutes. So I'll be sending you back in again. But have you made more progress? Are you almost done?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I've opened the room again, so please feel free to accept and go back in. Oh, I'm not sure what's going on. Right, let's close it. Let's close it again. So we're all back in here. Let's.
I cannot start my camera. It says it's being used in other apps.
Yeah, because apparently you're still in the breakout room, and so it's not letting me reset it as well. Yeah, I think this is the thing with Zoom. So we have
leave. Okay, I think it gave me option to leave.
Yeah, if you do, then I'll be able to reset it. Thank you.
Oh, I think I'm in 1 second. I was in both, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you can leave.
Now it's okay.
Okay, you're okay, great. Okay, let me do it again. So hopefully you're almost done and ready to present. Yeah. So yeah, so should I stop you in 10 minutes then? Because we only have 20 minutes.
We're ready, and each of us is going to talk about a different risk factor. So in order to finish by 7, we can start if everyone is ready. I think we're all ready, I think.
So 5 minutes, or should I stop you in 5, or should we continue now?
No, I think
we're ready to continue, I think.
Oh, okay. So no need for the breakout room then. Great. So who is going to start?
I can go, I mean, first, don't mind. So the company we chose, as Emily said, it's Consalco, and they provide legal, financial, and accounting services in Cyprus and the UK. And the type of risk that I thought about and decided to go with is data security breach, which falls under the classification of, it's an operational systemic risk. And the sources of risk, it has both external and internal sources of risk. Examples of external sources of risk would be cybersecurity attacks from malicious users. We have various types of this, like malware, phishing, ransomware, and they're constantly developing, and it's becoming a real pain for companies and those involved in cybersecurity industry to try to prevent this, because it's developing at a really fast rate. And internal sources of this risk can come usually when there are poor systems of control and security in a company. And we can see, you can have, let's say, for example, physical security risk if there's any data left or equipment left unsupervised or in a room that isn't locked within the building, or if there's the actual act of physical theft by employees or by someone else. There's also the chance of the equipment being used by unauthorized devices, by personal phones. So let's say, how many times have we connected to our business Skype from the phone, which it's not encrypted like our work laptop is, but we've joined through Skype, and it's a risk because it's much easier to go on the phone rather than from our laptop. And yeah, and it can also happen by data sharing, if it's deliberate or not. So if you go outside and you talk, and you might give some data that's confidential without you knowing or without you intending it to. And yeah, this is something that has to be safeguarded and taken into account, so we reduce this type of risk. Examples of this can be like a two-factor authentication, maybe have both your passcode, and then it would tell you, give us this new number code that was sent to your phone as a two-factor authentication process by encrypting data and creating backups that are secured in a safe location, increasing employee training and awareness on the risks of data security and data breaches, updating anti-malware and antivirus software, and by using randomly generated passwords, which are harder to guess and predict, and not have the same password for every account. Like, I don't want to say it, but I might have
Don't let your boss hear that. Okay.
So yeah, I think that's one type
of risk.
Type of risk.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. You covered it very well as well. So thank you for explaining that it can be both external and internally driven. So that's really important that you acknowledge the sources of this particular risk. Because in the future, if you have to write about it, then you've already talked about how you would manage and mitigate it. And this is essentially the structure we're going to be using for all the various risks that we cover. Is what is the risk, we identify it, how we're exposed to it, to what degree are we exposed, but also how do we manage it, okay? Because it's one thing to identify risk, then we also need to be aware of the management aspects of risk as well. So thank you very much for covering both aspects very well. All right, who wants to go next?
Okay, I'll go next. So I chose the liquidity risk for this company. So the liquidity risk is the risk that the company has, if the company has insufficient funds to meet its obligations. For example, this particular company, it provides, as Constantinos said, legal services, corporate services in Cyprus for Cyprus companies, accounting. So, for example, following of some stress events or changes, the company might have losses. It can be, for example, due to change of regulations in Cyprus. For example, compliance procedures are tightening up, or, for example, now that there is our transparency of beneficial owners and shareholders of the companies. So some international clients might not have interest into having Cyprus company anymore. So they'll close the companies in Cyprus, either they'll move it to another jurisdiction and domicile. So Consalco would lose from this. Another way they might not, for example, clients in their own countries might face themselves liquidity risks and they cannot pay their invoices to Consalco. For example, if the Consalco has now Russian clients, I'm not sure how Consalco is going to get paid from Russian bank accounts. This is one thing that came to my mind. So if this happens, then there will be no income for the company as before. The company won't be able maybe to pay salaries or to pay the government fees it has to pay to another service provider that the company has itself. We will pay rent maybe, and any operational expenses we will have difficulty to pay to meet any obligation. So I'm thinking in such cases what Consalco could do. It's one thing is reduce operational cost, maybe restructuring of departments, or even or maybe funding from related companies from the group, or taking a loan from a bank for the moment, or maybe looking to start providing different services that might attract clients, different clients for different reasons, and try to deal with this risk and Yeah, but it will take definitely time.
Yeah, exactly.
Time,
So I
yes.
was just going to say, you've just highlighted on the term called diversification, right? So you want to
Yes.
diversify your client base and your portfolio, especially these are income that you're getting in terms of fees, commission, and the rest. And if suddenly you had the big client in Russia, right now you'll be taking a serious hit
Yeah.
as an organization, and that's actually not a very good thing. So how would this company be able to stay solvent, stay afloat during the current crisis that we have? I'm going to stop. I wanted to say a bit more, but I'll just stop so we hear Sophie, and then I wrap it off before we go. Okay, thank you very much for that, Emily.
So I've picked market risk, and Consulco manage private equity investments, which is a really high risk sector. Is where private equity firms invest in new companies and startups on the belief that they'll make more money when they reach their full market risk, because it's so volatile. The chances of companies reaching their full potential is really low. So yeah, companies will lose money, and they use significant amounts of debt. And to combat this like Emily said, the diversification of risk. It's really important that companies invest in different companies, and also that the team that are managing the investments are very experienced and have a lot of knowledge to manage the risk. So that's what I've come up with for that one.
Okay, thank you so much, Sophie. So I like the fact that everyone tried not just to identify risk, but to identify the management aspect of it. And this is the structure you would find when we start talking about each individual risk. So when you go through the course guidance, you would see that I've picked some, not all of the risk, as you've already seen from the list. I'm not covering every blessed risk there is, but just some of the sort of the key ones, the popular ones, the recurring one, liquidity, credit risk, market risk, operational risk. And the structure essentially of the slides you will be seeing will be, where is it from, essentially where the sources of this particular risk, and essentially how can we manage it, but also measures. Now, not all risks are very easy to measure. Some have quantitative measures, and some others, there's not quite a measure for it. And that's where we'll look at what's known as a risk matrix in the future, where you just have to think about where's our exposure, how if it happens, what's the impact it will have, and what's the likelihood of it happening. So for example, we could say something in Russia right now, the expectation of those type of things happening is really low. However, the impact is really high. And that's really what a risk matrix is. The one thing we're not looking at that some of you might want to research on your own is a risk register as well. That also tends to use the same format and structure that we've just talked about. Where is the risk? Where is it exposed? How much exposed are we? And that's really important because for example, in what we've just talked about, if most of our clients are in Russia, then it tells us that we are exposed massively to a particular country and a particular client base. And if that hits us, what's the impact? So with a risk register, again, that's another tool that you use for especially non-quantitative measures to sort of highlight, okay, where's the risk? How exposed are we? And that's a very serious question that companies need to always try to answer. What is the risk we are? How exposed are we? What's the likelihood of it happening? And you find that in every risk measure we're looking at, it has these three elements there in order to measure what we're dealing with, because then it helps us say, okay, if it happens, what's the likelihood? How are we going to suffer? And of course, more than anything else, how do we manage it? It is always best to prevent than it is to avoid, or to prevent or avoid than it is to sort of react. All right, reacting is never easy, and you always take a hit. And then in that case, you're trying to reduce how much you suffer as a company from that effect. And that's not always the best way to go. The diversifying is always one of the best strategies we would encourage every organization to do. But we must be realistic. I mean, getting this client base is not that easy. It's so easy to say, oh, they should have been more diversified, but it's not that easy to get clients into your organization. There is competition. which comes from external factors as well. It's not that easy. It could have been, you know, personal relationships that due to the type of employees that you have and their network base. That's why most of your clients are in Russia. That's why most of your clients are from a particular region. And so it's important you understand the source of that, understand, well, do I need to expand my employee base so that I can therefore expand my client base? So it's drilling down and understanding how these things are connected. The final point I want to make before we run out of time is no risk is isolated. If you've noticed in all the discussions we have, you could pretty much connect every risk to each other. For example, the reoccurring theme here is Russia. Now that's, in a sense, a country risk, but nonetheless, it could, depending on what you have and where you are exposed, it could pretty much affect your portfolio, or it could be affecting your clients. So all of this at the end of the day is connected one way or the other. And what you find is when a company is squeezed in one area, over time, you see the effect in another area. And so it's not enough to say, this is the risk. It's also important to say, okay, how is this risk connected to another risk? Let's take operational risk, for example. If our data gets exposed and stolen and our client information is stolen, what's the cost of that? How does that affect our reputation? And how does that affect our ability to get more clients? So although at first it's not very obvious that this could actually lead to some liquidity crunch, eventually we might run into liquidity problems, especially if that cyber attack hits us financially. So although it comes from something operational, it's not in isolation. It could quickly be reflecting in other areas. Take market risk, for example. Where is your asset base? Like Sophie pointed out, very high risk investments. Now you started off with market risk, but very quickly you'll be in a liquidity crisis as well. So most of these risks are never in isolation. They're always connected to, therefore they could lead to risk in other areas kicking off or igniting further risk. So our ability to not just identify a risk, but also identify how risks are connected and coming up with a very holistic management approach is very, very important for us as organizations, okay? So I'll just say very well done. You've done a really good job. But this gives you, I don't know if this gives you a sense of what the whole module is about. This is really what we're doing. So we'll drill into each risk little by little. But like I said, please don't suddenly think about a risk in isolation, right? Always think about how it's connected. What else is it connected to? And sometimes the impact of a risk itself might not be that high, but when it starts affecting another risk, suddenly, kaboom, we're in a big trouble as a company, okay? So please always think about the interconnectivity of risk as well as where you find them, the sources of them, how exposed you are as an organization, okay? Any questions before we go? No? Okay, I'll just repeat your assignment for the next 3 weeks. Please remember to go on to EIMF 365. I need you to first go through the course, outline the guidelines, all right? Get a sense of the topics. I mean, you already have a sense of it from this first exercise and from the very first week lecture slides. That was the intro or more like the overview of what we'll be doing, yeah? The only issues we haven't talked about, for example, but someone highlighted is regulations. So that also matters. There are these other institutions, other stakeholders that matter as well. So we'll look at that in the whole process as part of the whole picture. So please get yourself familiar with that and then get yourself familiar with the assessment. Please highlight your questions. It's very important. I get your questions before the next live session, okay? So read that, study that as much as you can. You have 3 weeks to study it, but please try to do your best to make sure you cover it so we don't have any excuses. In addition, there could be other learning activities. I'll try not to give you any, but I might just think about 1 or 2 that I think is really important that you touch on before we meet in our next live session, okay? Great. Do we know when is our next live session again?
3 weeks.
Yeah, in 3
I think
weeks.
it's 22nd.
Okay. So same time, 22nd is also, I think, on a Thursday like this. So I'm hoping to see all three of you there. All right. Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening. And I'll
Bye.
see you on the 22nd. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.